This is the Philanthropy Show, connecting and inspiring philanthropy. Here's your host, Lou Ann Walters.
Welcome to the Philanthropy Show. I'm your host, Lou Ann Walters. We know that it takes a lot of compassion to work in the nonprofit world. And we also know that it takes honest and open conversation. So what are those big conversations? Well, joining us today is the President and CEO, Dave Biemesderfer, of Florida Philanthropic Network, and he's actually designed his entire statewide summit on philanthropy around what are these next big conversations on philanthropy that we're going to have in Florida. That's exciting, that's brave, and it's very open. So Dave, welcome.
Thank you.
And thanks for being.
Great to be here. So glad you're having the show on philanthropy.
Yeah, isn't it great?
Yeah, it is.
And here we are in the Nonprofit Center in our little green screen set.
I love it. I love it.
Well, tell us a little bit about FPN and this desire this year for these big conversations. That's challenging, number one.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, this is going to be our 7th annual Statewide Summit on Philanthropy. It's really the only time each year that the entire philanthropic sector from across the entire state of Florida comes together to talk about the pressing issues in the state. And this year, our committee really wanted to challenge the field to really say, what are those next conversations that are difficult to have, that we need to be having? What are the debates? So that we can really make the greatest impact with our philanthropic investments. It's really about being very conscious of your assets and using them as effectively as possible to make a difference for the good in the state of Florida.
Congratulations. Have you had a lot of feedback on it? This is an exciting, I mean, I enjoyed last year's summit as well, but this is an exciting topic because we're really forward focused. You know, where is it going? What's been kind of the feedback that you've heard about this?
Well, it's been fantastic. It's going to be our largest ever in terms of attendance. We've already been seeding the conversations with our blog, having some of our members contribute what they think are the next big conversations for philanthropy, and been getting a lot of great contributions about things that are on our members' minds that they want everyone to address, from the rising tides, the rising waters in the state of Florida, to meeting the needs of veterans in our state and the growing veterans population, to dealing with people who are in extreme poverty in the state and how we're going to address that.
They're not little issues.
No,
they're not.
Huge issues.
And I want to really talk a little bit more around those in just a minute. But first, for those of us who are new to FPN or may not actually be in Florida, because you are the leader of Florida Philanthropic Network, which is over the state of Florida.
That's right.
And other states may be seeing this on our internet broadcast. What is the Florida Philanthropic Network? How does it operate?
Well, we are a membership association.
Okay.
Our members are philanthropic organizations of all types that fund the work of nonprofits throughout the state of Florida, and fund nonprofits of all types.
The funders.
The funders. It's the private funders, so family foundations, private independent foundations, corporate giving programs, corporate foundations, pretty much all the community foundations in the state of Florida. So any type of foundation or philanthropic organization that provides private funding to support the work of a nonprofit.
That's interesting because you have such a diverse membership group that they all may have different aspects or angles of how they see philanthropy. So you're kind of a unifying body.
We are.
Especially around different issues. You guys are working on this one, you may be working on here and pulling it all together.
Right. And when I talk to nonprofits, I always tell them, we have a saying in philanthropy, if you met one foundation, you've met one foundation. They're all very different in why they give and how they give. And so it's very interesting to bring them all together to talk about those unifying issues and how they can work together and partner together with each other as well as with their nonprofit community partners.
How did you even discover this job position? How did you get involved with FPN?
It was really just sort of stumbled into. I started in Minnesota with a similar organization called the Minnesota Council on Foundations. There are actually 34 organizations like this around the country.
Oh, fabulous.
And we all have our own national network. So I really started working with them. My background was in communications and started doing communications for that group back in the mid-90s, 20 years ago. And just loved it. I loved the field, and there's always something new to learn about it. So been in it ever since.
And this grouping that you're now, and you have been a part of since you came from Minnesota as well, goes up to, you mentioned the Council on Foundations.
Right, and that's the national version of FPN, is the Council on Foundations, and we're the voice. We work to really be the voice for philanthropy in the state of Florida, and the council works to be the voice for philanthropy nationwide, and does a lot of work in D.C. Representing our interests.
Do you have a lot of donors who are interested in getting involved in volunteering and whatnot in your organization?
We are a very volunteer-driven organization, so we have members serving on committees for us, putting in a lot of time to speak on our behalf, to help plan our work, we have a number of different affinity groups of our members, where members who care about education or about healthcare come together to see how they can work together and learn from each other, and those are all primarily volunteer-driven. So we really rely on our members to get involved to make it all work.
Do you see, since you're coming from Minnesota too, do you see a similar reflection of the challenges that you face in Florida across the country?
Some of the challenges are the same, but I think there's some unique aspects to Florida. For example, in terms of the economic recession, we were hit, as you know, harder than almost any other state, and it's taken us longer to recover from it. So I think there's still a lot of needs for people of low incomes to get back on track, maybe heightened a bit more. Also, in terms of philanthropy, in our research at FPN, we've shown that for the giving, if you look at the giving of foundations based in Florida, 60% of their grants go outside the state of Florida.
Really?
Which is a lot
60%.
higher. Yeah, in Minnesota it was more like under 40.
Wow.
So that's a unique challenge for us.
Is that because Florida is such a transitory state? I mean, people move here from elsewhere. They may have an alma mater somewhere else.
Well, that's one. Yeah, that's one really big reason, and it's a valid. It makes sense. I mean, it's all valid. People maybe spent their life in Boston and created their wealth there, retire here, but create their foundation here, but they give a lot of their money back in Boston, where they're really connected to the community, and and that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And there's also some big foundations in the state where when the donor, maybe 50 years ago, created it, they put into the charter the legal documents that they had to give certain percentages in different states. So, but because we are a transient state, because a lot of people come here at the end of their lives, it's a unique challenge for us in terms of philanthropy. And one of the many things FPN does is to help donors understand it's great that you're giving back in Boston or in Minneapolis, but you're also either full-time or part-time a resident here, and so we hope you consider giving here as well.
And that seems to be, from my perspective looking in, kind of one of your biggest responsibilities, in that you're helping find some solutions or answers or research or data or something to give to the funders so that they can make the best judgments, the best decisions that they can, whether it's on giving out of state or giving in state.
Right.
That's a big task.
Yeah, and if you care about an issue in Florida, whether it's arts or children, and you want to learn what others are doing and connect with others who are trying to solve that same problem, we're that focal point to be learning about the issue and learning about others who are also working on that same issue.
Wow. So. Well, Dave, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, I want to kind of dive a little bit more into these big conversations. We'll do kind of a preliminary. You've got your statewide summit that's coming up in just a little bit of time at the end of this month.
Yeah.
So so we want to get into that. So we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
Follow the Philanthropy Show on Facebook for behind-the-scenes action, polls, and commentary.
This summit is about innovation and game-changing.
It's an opportunity to connect, network, learn from each other.
Every year there are new collaborations and partnerships in the communities.
People who are bringing innovative solutions and strategies.
There's lots of foundations out there that are working and trying to solve some of the same problems.
inspired with a new idea, a new way to do their work, a new way to do their funding, somebody new to work with. That's my goal, that everyone has at least one of those kind of inspirational ideas.
I've learned tons of things already. Got resources to take home and put to work tomorrow.
Get ideas, get reignited, get excited about our work and the possibilities of what we do.
Getting a lot of different ideas from a lot of different leaders throughout the state.
So it's been really inspiring.
Back with grant makers from across the state to see where there's some commonalities in approach.
I think there's a much stronger sense of a statewide philanthropic community today than we had in our first summit.
It gives me the opportunity to talk to other people who do the same type of work I do. Chance to make those connections so that I can reach out to them later.
Some real resources that you can go back to your city and implement and start to really see the impact right away.
It's really exciting to see how similar strategies are being tried all over the state.
The group is a lot of fun, but everyone is so committed to their work. It's really neat to see other people who are definitely interested in making a positive difference in the world.
It's about connecting and it's about learning.
When these folks come together, things happen, right? There are solutions in this room.
Welcome back to the Philanthropy Show. Our guest today, Dave Biemesderfer with Florida Philanthropic Network, as they prepare for their 7th annual Statewide Summit on Philanthropy.
Yes.
Very exciting.
Yeah,
and
very exciting.
This year, the big topics are the big conversations. What are the next big conversations? Now, you mentioned, as we were talking before the break, a little bit about some of them, but I want to kind of go further into them. So in Florida, what are we seeing as the next big conversations we need to have to make philanthropy move forward?
And we're having those, there's two real buckets of those. One is around what are some of the issues we really have to figure out how to deal with, because there's been, for decades, some of our members have been trying to deal with some of these issues, and things aren't getting any better. So that we have to think about doing it differently. So how do we think differently about those issues? And then the second bucket of conversations is around how do we just do the work of philanthropy differently. And so in terms of the issues, we have both national and Florida funders coming in to talk about what has worked, like for example, to end chronic homelessness. And we're going to learn from other communities about how they've been able to do that and see if we can figure that out for Florida.
Other communities outside of Florida?
Yes, right. So we brought in some national funders who've had some success with that in other communities, and see if we can learn from them and translate that into Florida. So that's an example of a conversation. We also have some Florida funders talking about how they've worked in a small community in Florida to deal with hunger, childhood hunger, and decreasing that, and seeing if we can take what that community learned and bring it across the state of Florida.
So issue-specific, best practice-driven, how can we make those changes? You're also looking at kind of having those conversations that might be a little bit challenging. Those, I believe this, you believe that, but how can we work together kinds of things. You know, I'm thinking specifically of the can Democrats and Republicans communicate?
Yes, we're having
That's a big one.
A big one. We're having a liberal and conservative philanthropist talk about how can we come together.
Brave guy.
And,
but necessary.
Yeah, and we're doing it at breakfast when people might still be groggy, so maybe it'll be more civil. But yeah, so we want that, because we don't want to just have a conference where everyone just comes and agrees with everyone. Aren't we all doing great stuff? And
you know, and I love that you're doing this, and I hope that the philanthropic community, which I believe is everybody, but I hope that the specifically self-designated philanthropic community can maybe be that bridge, because it does seem sometimes, and because we're not a nonprofit, I get to speak to it, but it does seem sometimes that we are so polarized that we just can't find a commonality.
Right.
And these issues are too important to let it be that, you know, he said, she said, whatever,
right.
or blue said, red said
right.
conversation.
Right. I totally agree. And I think that's one of the strengths of philanthropy, because we are independent. We aren't government agencies. We really don't have a dog in the fight. We aren't out fundraising for the most part. Most of our members have endowments, and they're giving grants of those endowments. So we have a more of an ability to start those courageous conversations and provide a safe space for those in our community.
So Dave, we have these conversations. People have a safe space where they can communicate their idea, their thought,
right.
and then what? I mean, are there next steps designed or some kind of a framework and process? What do you do with those conversations?
Well, there's a lot of things we do, from the formal to the informal. Every year there are connections made at our conference that lead to collaborations and partnerships. We're told that every year by people who come. Someone in Tampa Bay meets somebody in Jacksonville, and suddenly they're doing something together who didn't know each other before. And so those kind of sparks happen all the time. We then intentionally look at what came out of the conference and where were the real, where was the energy, where were the things where clearly there's something more. And then we follow up with additional conversations throughout the year, or additional convenings or webinars, or maybe even some research. So we really use what the conversations at that conference to inform our work for at least the next year. And you know, for example, 3 years ago, we had a session at our conference about some people saying we really need a statewide nonprofit association in Florida that focuses on being the voice for the sector. And out of that, now this year that organization was created, and they are actually now hosting a session. They just hired their first executive director, and now they're going to say, here's what we're doing. So that all started with a session at our conference 3 years ago, and we are playing a big role. FPN is playing a big role in making that organization happen. So there's all those kinds of things that come out of our conference each year that we are the stewards of continuing, and we are very intentional about that.
And how do you decide what are the conversations that are those that are so poignant or pertinent that they need to be happening right now?
Well, part of it is just if you see the sparks fly in the room, well, I think there's something here. And then, you know, of course we survey it, we evaluate it, and we ask everybody what was it from this conference you want us to continue to. And so we have sort of a more formal way of doing it and just sort of the more informal way of doing it.
You have conferences throughout the year in different aspects and different parts of Florida as well, and I know that one of the conversations you'd had previously a few years ago was around this big transfer of wealth that is upcoming, and that is going to happen over a couple of decades.
Yes.
And you got together and had a study created for this transfer of wealth to look at Florida specifically and the different counties within Florida. Now, this study has also been done in other parts of the country, correct?
That's correct.
And what is the overall gist of this?
Well, the overall gist is with the baby boom generation starting to age, there's going to be the largest ever amount of wealth being transferred from that generation to the next generation. It's going to be historic, just because there's more baby boomers. There's been just this huge bump of people in the population growth patterns. And so we looked at how much is it actually that's going to be transferred. So there are economists who have developed a methodology to actually estimate that. So we knew it was going to be big, but exactly what is it? So that's what the research is about.
So I want to talk about that. We're going to take a short break, and I want to talk more about the transfer of wealth. And when we come back, we have a special guest joining us, and who is a member of, she's a vice chair of the board of the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay, and the community foundations were also instrumental in putting this study together for Florida.
Yes. 10 of our Community Foundation members, including the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay, helped to fund the study.
Excellent. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, Donna Longhouse, also an estate planning attorney, which is kudos, because we need to have these conversations around how do we talk to donors.
Absolutely.
So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
And now a word from our studio sponsor.
Hi, I'm Emily Benham. I'm the CEO of the Nonprofit Leadership Center of Tampa Bay, and I'd like to talk today a little bit about board governance. It's really one of our #1 requests here from our nonprofit community. How do you help us build a better board so we can be more impactful in the community in our work and really drive our mission home? So what I would say is there are a couple ways to look at that. Since starting here at the Nonprofit Leadership Center, one thing I learned from research is that 70% of board agendas and board meetings are focused on things that occurred in the past. And think about that. Think about that for your own organization. What does that mean? So you're focusing on what you either did or didn't do in the recent past, rather than focusing on the future, what opportunities are in front of you, what are your goals, what do you need to change in order to achieve those goals. So I've really taken a new look at our board agenda here and really tried to focus on the future, and also looked at our programming to see, are we really helping nonprofits do the same thing? So we can help you in a number of different ways. Our board governance training series that we do right here in our training center is a 3-part series. The first part focuses on roles and responsibilities of your board members. The second part is understanding financial statements. And the third, probably my favorite, is fearless fundraising, because there really should be no other type of fundraising in your organization. So those are 3 evening sessions we schedule twice a year. And I would encourage you and your board members to take advantage of that training. The second way we can help is through custom training. We can go directly to a nonprofit in the community and come in and do a board retreat on strategic planning. We can do a development audit. We can teach roles and responsibilities, fearless fundraising, and understanding financial statements, all directly to your entire board at once. So we find that as a great way to have a deeper impact with an organization, to have a dialogue about what your needs are, and to be sure you have the best board possible to affect your work. The third way that we can interact with boards, and a new area for us, is really working directly with for-profit organizations. A lot of organizations have asked us, banks especially more recently, we want our executives to go out in the community to be great board members. So can you help us train them? And we say, yes, we can. That's one of our favorite things to do, is to really see the light bulbs go off in a volunteer's head, like, wow, there's a lot of ways I can really help these organizations, and I want to be a great board member. So those are 3 ways that we can work with nonprofits and for-profit companies in the area of board governance. Here at the Nonprofit Leadership Center, we really champion the work of the 10,000 nonprofits in the Tampa Bay area. We educate, we empower, and we connect, and we look forward to connecting with you soon. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Philanthropy Show. Talking today with Dave Biemesderfer, President and CEO of the Florida Philanthropic Network, about the next big conversations. And now we have joining us another special guest, Donna Longhouse. She's an estate planning attorney with Allendale in Tampa, and also vice chair of the board of the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay. So thank you, Donna, for joining us in this conversation.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
It's a very important one. You know, one of the conversations that we were speaking about before the break, Dave, was this transfer of wealth, this report that other communities around the country have done, and now FPN has done with the employment, I don't know what you'd call it, of the community foundations, right. 10 of them,
support
and
of them,
the
yes.
support.
Yeah.
And what it revealed was, as you were describing it, these baby boomers who are going to be transitioning, passing, and leaving all of this money, right. this in vast wealth, and it is billions. We're not talking about
$322 billion in the next 10 years.
Wow.
In Florida.
Wow, that's just in Florida.
That's just in Florida.
That's a big number.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And community by community, everybody has their own statistic, but I think the bigger conversation is, how do we have this conversation? Philanthropy relies on donors, I mean on the nonprofit sector. And unlike the corporate world where you can sell a widget or you can sell a service, the clients of the philanthropic world, the nonprofit sector, don't have necessarily money to pay. So it is the philanthropists, the donors, who are making this go around. And with this kind of influx that's coming, how do we have that conversation? How do we, let's start off with you, Dave. What are some of the general conversations around this right now?
Well, just in general, one other piece of data from the study, we showed that if we just took 5% of that $322 billion and had donors leave that to charity, to a charitable endowment, it would result in additionally $800 million a year to be given to nonprofits to support their work, which is about a 60% increase over what is given now by foundations in the state. So that's a lot. And
that's 60% per year, or is that
60% per year? No,
60%
per year. And so if another thing we try to get across is everyone has wealth. If you die and you have $1,000 more in assets than your liabilities, you've left wealth. And so everybody who is in that position, they have something, even if they left 5%, no matter what the amount, it adds up to a lot. You may think, oh, that's not going to make much of a difference. But when it all comes together, you need to understand it will make a big difference for a state. So everybody can be a philanthropist. Everybody can leave something, a portion of what they have to charity, and it would make a big difference. So we just try to get that message across, that everybody can make a difference.
I think maybe one of the difficulties is, a lot of people don't necessarily understand the vehicles that are available for philanthropy. But Donna, you're an estate planning attorney. How do you have a conversation with your clients about what they can do with their money? How do you begin that,
Typically, as part of the initial estate planning process, part of the conversation is, do you have any charitable goals? Do you have any philanthropic goals? Are there any organizations you currently work with, that you currently benefit? Would you like to do something at death to further benefit those organizations? And then it becomes an exploration. It's, philanthropy, giving, especially at death, lifetime is a little different, but at death, it's not one size fits all. A lot of people have emotional ties that create their philanthropy. Then it's an exploration of, do they understand that there may be a broader philanthropic goal they can reach just from that single emotional tie? Or a lot of times it's simply your community, church, college, and then exploring how they can benefit those organizations through their philanthropy as well. But there has to be an initial discussion up front, whether it's with their attorney, CPA, financial planner, or even through community activities like attending, a breakfast for Boys and Girls Clubs, for example.
You speaking to this, because this is what you do, this is your livelihood, and this is your knowledge base, and I think that's part of the conversation is, yes, we can communicate it with foundations, with nonprofits, but it's so important that the professional advisors who are working with the clients truly understand the vast sum of this transfer of wealth that is coming into play. And that, like you said, 60% increase in what is currently being given, that's a big sum.
And it's really important to have more advisors like Donna being able to have these conversations skillfully with the donors, because some advisors are kind of uncomfortable for some reason bringing it up if their client doesn't bring it up. And what Donna mentioned about being able to help them see how they translate their passion into a charitable endeavor, that takes some skill to be able to do that.
And conversation. And exploring what their passion is and how they can become more passionate. There's so much that donors out there aren't even aware of, or aren't aware would be a passion of theirs if they understood how they could get there. And it takes a long time to have those conversations. I agree, there are a lot of advisors who don't even initiate the conversation. And some of that is knowledge, what's out there in the community. I've spent all of my career becoming familiar with the organizations that are out there so I can help my clients. Organizations such as the Community Foundation, for example, but so many others that I've been a part of and that I have become aware of and get to know more about. Because if I'm not knowledgeable, I'm not going to be able to help my client achieve their goals, or at least get them to the place we can get more information.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I think that's very important. And that made me think, too, about, I wish that every nonprofit would, and the executive directors are going to go, yes, I know, I do. we try. Could have a professional advisor or 2 or 3 on their board to get to know, like you have done in working with different nonprofits, the effectiveness and the passion. And you know, philanthropy is a heart thing for me. It's not about just, well, this is, I'm in the business of giving and this is what's going to be. And I think that when a professional advisor can have that personal experience with it, don't they have a better idea of how to communicate that with their donor then, or their client who becomes a donor for the nonprofit that they're serving with? Donna, you're on the board of the Community Foundation. You have a passion for it. I've spoken with you several times about it, and I know from having worked there as well. Tell me why the endowment is such an incredible vehicle, or what do you think of the endowment? I'm leading you along.
And absolutely, but even, you know, predating my involvement with the Community Foundation, but the Community Foundation is endowment for the most part, so it's critical. But in every other organization, which the Community Foundation helps them develop this, their own endowment, you know, so many organizations out there are too consumed with day-to-day operations, getting the money in to pay the bills, to pay the light bills, and not seeing that that's short-sighted to their longevity, because the endowment is what is going to keep them going in perpetuity. It's going to keep their mission going, growing, being strong, and an organization like the Community Foundation can help every organization even begin a small endowment, which is going to kick off money every single year. And then the donors who want to benefit the broad community with a lot of money without any particular organization being responsible for that have something like the Community Foundation, who are great stewards in our community of donors' funds and endowments for all the nonprofits in our broad geographic region. And so that's where I go to talk to my clients once we get their philanthropic goals out into the discussion, you know, what their passion is, who they'd want to benefit, or what kind of activity they would want to benefit. Domestic violence, for example, which can cover such a broad number of organizations. And then to have the discussion with them about how important the endowment is to serving those organizations long term, after the client is gone, after their family is gone, but to help those organizations survive for the future, which is so critical.
I love that. And combine that with this influx of wealth going from one generation to the next, possibilities. It'll be very interesting. You know, don't know if you know this, we're doing an on-location show at the summit this year, which will be fun afterwards, to hear what some of the conversations were around it. And it'll be fascinating now. This is before what happens after, you know, with the transfer of wealth conversation. So we're about to wrap up the show, but before we do, I wanted to invite you both to give a little information about a segment that we call Truth or Care. And that is, what does your heart, what is the definition of philanthropy to your heart, from a heartfelt sense? It can be a special story that you think of, it can be something that's significant. Why are you involved in and invested in philanthropy, and why is it significant to you?
Well, I can say I can tell a story about my first real personal involvement with philanthropy. I was on, in the late 80s, early 90s, on the board of a brand new nonprofit in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, where I was living at the time, that was established to be a safe space for LGBT youth, for gay and lesbian youth. And at that time, that was considered a very radical thing to be doing, and a lot of donors were like really nervous about, you know, touching that with a 10-foot pole. And it was the Community Foundation in Minneapolis, the Minneapolis Foundation, that gave us our first operating grant to enable us to get started. And the organization's still in existence today. It's grown and thrived. But that's, to me, the example. That's where I learned that philanthropy can take a risk when others may not be wanting to. It can be flexible, it can be innovative. It can help people in the community coming together to meet a new need or a need they see, to create that spark. And so, you know, that has stayed with me to this day as to why foundations are important, why philanthropy is important, and why having endowed philanthropic dollars available for those kinds of community needs is important.
it brings together a community in ways that maybe aren't available in other means.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's wonderful. Miss Donna?
Well, you know, from my perspective, it's a more generic story because I work with so many people who are so generous in the community, often without need for recognition or even would rather remain anonymous, and the impact that they can have in the community. And it coincides with my own belief in giving back, through education, which our country supports and promotes, and in my case, higher education, being available to help me get through all of the colleges and universities that I attended and become a lawyer and work in the community, and then being able to work with all these great donors. The whole package is the idea of giving back without need for recognition and the benefit to the community that has.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you both for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Good luck with your summit.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for stopping by, Donna.
You're welcome.
And here we go. More with the Philanthropy Show. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Yay. So that is the conclusion of this edition of the Philanthropy Show. Join us next week, Mondays at 4 o'clock on thephilanthropyshow.com. See you then.
Do you have an idea for the Philanthropy Show? Contact us via our website or email us at tps@myvideovoice.com.